Well, hello and welcome back to Insomniac Sports. As you can see, if you're here on the YouTube side of things, not just listen to the audio side, there's a new element. You see my face, and next to me, you see a telephone because Craven doesn't have a camera. So, but he's still here.
Well,
We still have his
I
voice.
have a I have a camera, but as the saying goes, I have a face for radio. So
That's why it's perfect that we're here on YouTube. It was funny before we started the show. You and I were talking about how we got in this call a couple minutes before to set everything up, and I feel like we just sat around. I sat around trying to not talk to you, so I didn't say anything interesting before we started. It's like I
yeah,
just got to ignore him. So we just sat there in silence for 10 minutes before we started.
it felt very awkward because that's not what we do.
No,
So
we get in the call and immediately was when we started talking. We started talking.
immediately,
Oh, did you see this with the Washington? Did you see whatever this? And we kept going. Oh, so it's but
yeah,
another element for the YouTube folks, because the reason we started this show is because we were sitting up here late at night with not enough sleep, talking football and sports and watching CPU games on different video games, and we figured, hey, I wonder if someone else might enjoy listening along with us. So we are going to throw up a sim here from Craven. Has lovingly provided this, as he has some slider sets that we're going to check out in the background. If you're on the audio side, you're not really missing much. We just like to have the thing going in the background because we all have, ADHD and need stimulation. But got Commanders and the Titans, which, you can start that whenever. But that being said, we got football to talk about tonight on this lovely midnight here. If you combine our two time zones, it comes out to about midnight.
yes,
And
yeah.
the first thing that we should probably take off the top of is obviously a couple days ago announced that DeAndre Hopkins was released by the Arizona Cardinals and is now a free agent, meaning he's going to land somewhere. I've seen him rumored to the Chiefs, God forbid. But I want to talk to you a little bit. For one, are you surprised to see him get released and not traded?
Well, on gut reaction, yes. DeAndre Hopkins, right? Just a little while ago, he was the highest paid player in the league, or highest paid receiver at least. I don't know. He got the bag, right? But he's now been traded twice. Well, I'm sorry, he's been traded and then cut. And not only was he cut, they could have cut him, I think, later and saved money or something like that. I don't remember what the deal was. I had it kind of worked out, but I didn't take notes. I don't know what the deal was. They were willing. Let's put it this way. They didn't even try, and there's a couple of reasons, a couple of ways to look at this. They were looking for trades. Nobody wanted him, apparently. And they're taking the whole cap hit now, limiting their ability to possibly sign someone and compete. They don't want him, and they don't care if it costs them. That's kind of interesting to me, and so I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. I know that he's got an agent now, but his name was attached to the guy that was an agent, and I'm using air quotes, for Roquan Smith, and the league sent out a memo like, "Don't talk to this guy. He wasn't certified."
Kelton Crenshaw. Was that the one that
Was
you're?
that it?
He's
There's another guy.
Oh, or did he have another one before Kelton Crenshaw? Because Crenshaw's his agent now. He picked him up after he became free agent. He already represents Devonta Smith, Chase Young, and Kayvon Thibodeau, according to CBS.
Yes, he's part of Crenshaw's part of Clutch Sports,
Yes.
and he is one of the ones that is accredited by the or licensed or whatever they say it is by the NFLPA. Uh, what the other guy is someone that is not that has done some business. There's a couple of guys that in the past couple of years have been kind of being agents for people, and there's some issues that the league has with that, some issues that the Players Association has with it, and so uh, this guy, and I feel like an idiot because I can't think of his name. Um, it's like Psy something or and I don't know,
I don't remember his
but
name.
but this guy like a memo went around. Anyway, all that to say, there's some odd things there. It may also be I don't know that I don't know what his injury situation really has been. There was some talk last season that he was healthy, but he wouldn't play in the last couple of games. It was a lost season already. In a way, you can't blame the guy. An injury, as we will find out on a later topic, injuries really make a difference in how much money you make. Um, so that could be part of the equation. I've never heard anything that says he's a bad guy in the locker room, uh, but who knows? There've been a couple little things like that, and I think with the money. One of the other things I saw. Sorry, I'm bouncing around because I've got all these notes jotted down. One of the other things I saw is when Odell Beckham got his contract, which was a little bit of a shock, being that much guaranteed money. Then Hopkins started saying, "Well, if he's getting that, I should be getting that." They want that again. I understand why they want it, but I also understand why teams are a little shy about giving them the guaranteed money. And I think it all just kind of came together. Um, it is what it is. He's old enough, and possibly it's lost enough of a step. I don't know. They just said to cut ties.
Well, already in the young life of our show, we have some.
That was a bit of a ramble.
We have
Apologize.
Well, no. We have some breaking news.
Oh.
If I can pull up the exact.
Looking at your screen with breathless anticipation.
I will. I don't know if I'll put it up fully on the screen, but I will. I think breaking news. Where was this? Or did I get trolled? Keep talking while I find this. Hold on. I had this 2 seconds ago.
What? No problem. I do think the guaranteed money was a big part of the problem. And I watched a little bit of a couple of shows today. I watched like the NFL Focus show, and Florio was on there. Kind of interesting. Mike Florio was low key hard on DeAndre Hopkins. It's kind of like, kind of talking like, you're past your prime. You're not going to get that kind of money, kind of thing. A little bit. That was kind of interesting. And some of this stuff is kind of hard to. Stuff gets out sometimes because people want it to get out, and they misinformation kind of thing, and that's hard to know what's up with that. I think the Cardinals saw an opportunity. I think they're tanking.
I mean, I think they're 100% tanking. Caleb Williams, 2024. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
And the Cardinals look like they're going to be awful this season. You look at that team, you look at the roster, and you bring in a new coach. It just doesn't look like a good situation. And with Hopkins, go ahead.
No. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I'll remember what
I was going to say. And with Hopkins, I mean, he hasn't finished his last 2 seasons in Arizona. He's going 30 years old.
Yes.
Yes. If you're going to move on to a new era of the team, it's the right time to make that move. And
exactly, yes.
I mean, he had 717 yards last season. But you've seen there's reports out this week that the executives around the league think that DeAndre Hopkins is kind of washed. That they think he's lost a step. That they think he's too slow to play in the league now. Which is interesting because we haven't really seen I mean, Hopkins has been a free agent for a while, and we've heard rumors of where he might go.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been a flurry of activity. Though I mean, I've heard almost everyone linked to him. I've heard the Giants, I've heard the Jets, I've heard the Chiefs, I've heard the Texans, I've heard everyone, practically everyone. I feel like
Yeah.
the Patriots too.
Florio today said, yeah, yeah, the Patriots stepped into that too, but everybody thinks that's because the Patriots like to mess with people. Florio today said Chiefs and Bills were his top two. It'd be kind of a luxury pick, whatnot. But he also was one that it said he was hinting at he was beating it around the bush a little bit, hinting at he lost a step. And something of note that came across, looking at some of the, Hopkins wasn't all that fast to begin with. He came into the league, I think his 40 time was something like 4.57. Hey, faster than me, but I'm not trying to run away from guys that are trying to kill me. If that is in fact true, I was not able to verify it. I did a little bit of looking around to try to find. Then I got a phone call and got distracted because I'm old. But if that is in fact true, and then he has lost a step, well, that's a pretty slow receiver, right? And so I could see that as being a factor. Maybe people looking at him, there is that inherent, at least, whiff of fragility because he hasn't finished the last two seasons. And then if he's making too much noise about wanting Odell Beckham money, is he really? Somebody really going to pick him up?
Yeah.
And then on the other side, then you alluded to this. In a way, it seemed kind of like, oh wow, Cardinals. This is a good time to do it. In a way, it's smart. It's hard to sell to their fans. It's something you and I've talked about in the past. Is that sometimes guys get cut too early or fired too early or whatnot. So you're going to sell to your fans. They pretty much telling their fans by taking that whole dead cap hit now, because they can roll half of it over or something like that. They could cut it to 11 this year and then have it be. It's like 22 million, just a little. It could have cut basically half now, half next year. They're taking it all now. Well, that cuts down on their. Maybe there's always somebody that comes up as a free agent for some reason, or for a trade for some reason. They don't have the flexibility to go get him.
Yeah, and it sounds. I mean, how many years were left on Hopkins' contract? Do you remember? Was there a few years left, or was that he coming up on a new deal?
I want to say maybe 2.
Because it was interesting. I remember a couple days ago, I just found the tweet. Mike Girardi had reported that Buffalo was interested, the Patriots were interested, but what he said, best I can tell, no one believes he is what he once was, and that will be part of the challenge in acquiring the player. A couple teams I spoke with before the draft believe that money will be the driver in this more than a ring. Went on to say that he would think that Hopkins is looking for OBJ kind of money.
Right. And that was a little bit, I mean, isn't it funny? You think about this. Before that contract, would Hopkins have been amenable to less? Right? And then OBJ gets that it's like, and it's guaranteed. It's just like, holy smoke. In a way, Hopkins might have looked at that and gone, hey, I can get more money. It may actually be hurting him, because now he's not as open to a more reasonable contract. And it's tough. This is a tough one. I hear people all the time talk about people being. This is slightly off topic, but I'm talking about Hopkins. You performed at a high level. When you've been an athlete at that level, I mean, I had a hard time accepting that I couldn't jump over a fence as easily as I used to when I started getting old. Imagine being a pro athlete of that caliber. You don't really think you're washed. Most of them don't think they're done as soon as everybody else knows they're done, right?
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to be too hard on the guy in that sense for being like, no, I'm DeAndre Hopkins. He was magnificent for years, right? So
Eighth
that's a
most
tough
yards
one.
in his first 8 seasons or something like that. I forget the exact
Yeah,
stat.
really impressive on some teams that weren't great.
No. Yeah, I
There,
mean,
there, there are a couple competitive ones in there, but they weren't great. So
no,
yeah,
they weren't good
that's a
teams.
tough one for a guy. Um, it's interesting. I don't think he's going to get that money. I think he's going to be a desperation signing later for if I were guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope he doesn't go to Kansas City because then he'll be great. um,
Right. He doesn't need to be there, does he? He
but
just
I
needs to
feel like
be.
he's going to, if he goes to a team that doesn't need him, that's going to be amazing because obviously he can still um, catch the football. It's just the
Yeah.
question you have is about whether he can separate
Yeah.
against the number one. But if he's not working against the number one and he's able to slide into that more of, what's a good comparison player?
Well.
Slide into that role that Antonio Brown filled with the Buccaneers when he was there for that
Yes.
season, where
Yeah.
Antonio Brown was out of the league for a bit, but then he came back, played with the Bucks, and him as the number 3 was just absolutely unfair.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing I feel like with Hopkins. If he can go somewhere where he doesn't have to be the number 1, that's going to be unfair.
Well, and Andy Reid. If Andy Reid's the guy designing a game plan to incorporate him,
Oh God,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
screwed.
yeah, yikes. Hey, I don't know if they've got the money. You know who else could probably find a way to use him? Uh, you, you, you might shut me off if I say this. I'll bet Sean Payton could figure out a way to use him.
I mean,
They
Sean
don't
Payton could
need him,
definitely
do they? They've
find
got
a
some
way.
young guys.
I think the Broncos are so deep at wide receiver. They have
Yeah,
a ton of wide receiver depth, which I mean, we'll see if it actually pans out. I want to see if Jerry Jeudy works out. If taking a look at according to over the cap, yeah, I'm not quite sure how the Chiefs would manage it. They have a $652,000 in cap space.
Oh, is that all?
That's all.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the thing, and it doesn't sound like you said. It doesn't sound like it's about getting a ring. It's about getting the money. So you know, he's not gonna go to the Chiefs for a cheap
No,
contract. Probably. I mean, we could be surprised, but
no. I would be surprised to see him in the Chiefs. I'm hopeful because as a Bronco fan, I don't want to see Patrick Mahomes with any more weapons. I mean, I'm a side point here, but the Chiefs traded away their best wide receiver
yeah,
and got better.
yeah.
Who gets rid of Tyreek Hill and gets better? The Chiefs.
The Chiefs.
I mean, it's been like I think it's been like 8 years since the Broncos beat the Chiefs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they haven't beat them since
That
Peyton
long?
Manning. Peyton Manning
Oh,
and the
wow.
Broncos lost the second game against them, so it's been since the first game of the Chiefs that 2015 season. And the Broncos
Wow.
have come awfully close a few times, but they've never gotten over the hump. And yeah, man, I don't want to see them get any more talent.
Yeah.
But speaking
Yeah.
of talent and lack thereof, contracts, injuries, it kind of segues over to another interesting news this week. You know a little bit more about this than I do, but Jimmy Garoppolo obviously signed with the Raiders in the offseason. And some news has come out with his regards to his physical and how that's going to affect his contract.
Yes. Yes, Jimmy Garoppolo, hereafter known as Addendum G. I got that from, that is not of my own. That's a Rich Eisen thing. So credit where credit's due. But it was Addendum G in his contract that was the language rework that if he does not, because he needs foot surgery on his left foot, and if he is unable to come back from that, he doesn't get anything. He gets no money, like $0.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That
A
is
big deal. And there's a
big
few
deal.
questions. There's a few questions. So he went there. They had the contract in place, and he went there, and they had the physical because that's you're offered the contract, but until you sign it, sorry, I was about to yell at the screen. Until you sign it, you have to pass your physical and all that jazz. And then they had that press conference.
Glad to see that Carson Wentz sucks in the video game as much as he does in real life. Is that Wentz? I think that's Wentz, right?
It is not. It is not. We're a couple seasons in on this franchise, so
it's definitely not Carson Wentz. I interrupted you.
No, that was Carson Wentz like, however. The contract could be they went in and reworked it in order to have that in there. So that that's significant. You wonder, makes you wonder. Well, did they know about this when they went there? It doesn't sound like that's necessarily the belief. The Raiders aren't sitting here going, "Wow, you knew about this and tried to screw us," or anything. There's not, at least publicly, there's none of that happening. But yeah, it's a thing. It's a big thing, and they have like Brian Hoyer and guy they drafted from Northwestern.
The three quarterbacks they got are Brian Hoyer, Browns legend, 4th round pick Aiden O'Connell, and undrafted quarterback Chase Garbers. So their quarterback room is thin.
That is, and I mean that's a larger thing. I've said, we've talked before. I have fondness for Jimmy G because he came in and kind of righted the ship in San Francisco. When he started playing, I mean, when he got signed, they were bad, and they won a couple of games they shouldn't have won at first, and then and he's been hurt all the time. From all accounts, everybody in the locker room loves him. He's a good dude. All of that stuff, and almost anyone that went through San Francisco, I like him, right? But been hurt a lot, and I keep thinking, what on earth is going on over there that you put it all into that? And I know what it is. It's their coach thinking he needs these people that know his system. That's why Hoyer's there, because he was with the Patriots. Knows his system, his quote unquote system. These coaches and their system. So they make this big swing for Jimmy Garoppolo, who, despite my fondness for the guy, I'm like, really? He's better than Derek Carr? Really? You think he's better than Derek Carr? And now they might end up with, Brian Hoyer. I mean, crazy. It's crazy.
I mean, I can wrap up the Raiders' issues in two words. Josh McDaniels.
Well,
As a Bronco fan, I watch Josh McDaniels decimate this team.
You do not have any fondness for Josh McDaniels.
Any fondness for Josh McDaniels.
Understandable.
I would love to have Josh McDaniels on the show and tell him how little fondness I have for him. For example, his affinity with former Patriot players. Like, when the Patriots get rid of a player, they're done. With very few exceptions. LeGarrette Blount was an exception. Wes Welker had a little bit left in the tank, but really not that much. I mean, really, you look at these guys, and Darrelle Revis, I think, was the one guy who really had a lot left in the tank after he left.
Right.
when the Patriots move on from someone, they are 2 to 3 years from the end of their career, max. Historically speaking.
Yeah.
For the most part, some exceptions. They're really good at knowing when to move on from guys. They move on from guys, you're like, really? They just had a good season.
And they're unsentimental about it.
They're unsentimental.
They
They're
do it. They just do it.
ruthless. I remember McDaniels. I'm going to read you the stats of this guy.
Okay.
In 2006, he had 745 yards, 4.3 average, 6 touchdowns. 07, 835 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4.5 average. Neither of those seasons did he play a complete season. 08, 3 games, 98 yards. 09, he played 15 games, started 5, 757 yards, 3.9 yard average. And he was released. His name, Lawrence Maroney. And Josh McDaniels snags him up for the Denver Broncos. And you know what he does? 36 attempts for 75 yards.
I remember that, yeah.
With a long of 13.
Yeah.
I don't think that Josh McDaniels can build a good football team.
No.
I think for a long-term success, I do not have confidence in him building a good football team. And when it goes to Jimmy Garoppolo, like you said, I love to see him succeed. He's not a great quarterback, but he's the quarterback. He's the interesting quarterback. This is a cold tangent we won't get into, but he's the quarterback that's kind of, it's that borderline between being a good quarterback and not being a good quarterback, where they're good enough to win a Super Bowl with the talent, but they're not good enough to elevate the talent. And those are always the guys that have half the people going, oh, he's great, and half the people being like, oh, he's awful. And it's like, no, he's just in the middle of it. He's just not. He just is. And I kind of felt like Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo was a little bit of a lateral move. I like Derek Carr a little bit more, but I felt like it was fairly lateral for the most part.
For the most part. There's things that Jimmy does a little bit better, but yeah.
But one thing that Derek Carr hasn't struggled with is really injuries like Garoppolo. I mean, if I pull up Garoppolo, and Garoppolo hasn't finished a season, played a full 16 games since 2019. Yeah. And in fact, he's only had 3 seasons in his career where he played 10 or more games.
Yeah.
That's not good.
I know.
I mean, the guy's 31.
Number one ability, availability.
Exactly.
And life is not fair. Jimmy has not been available 100%. Yeah.
And he's a solid quarterback. He's not a bad quarterback when he is playing, but I mean, he has a 40-17 record as a starting quarterback. That's really good.
Yes.
But like we said, best ability, availability, and since he came to San Francisco, he has had 1 season where he was able to string together a full season. And that season, they went to the Super Bowl, which is credit to him. But the Raiders, I feel like bringing Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't make much sense. And bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo, this is where I think it's unforgivable. You bring in Jimmy Garoppolo, you know he has injuries. And who do you bring in as your backups? Aiden O'Connell, Brian Hoyer?
Even if he didn't have this injury, right, if he'd passed this physical, you're still banking on someone who, as you pointed out, last full season he made it through was 2019. That's not that long in terms of life. That's a long time ago in football. And that's how long it's been since he's made it through a full season. It matters.
He's gone 38-17 with the 49ers, and the 49ers have drafted 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
In the last 2 seasons because he's not consistent. And as a Bronco fan, I could wish nothing more than the Raiders to not be good. But as a fan and as someone who has a heart, as someone who has a heart, though, I am sorry, Raiders fans.
Yes.
That you have to deal with Josh McDaniels because
You wouldn't wish
I
that on
don't
anyone.
I don't even wish that on my worst enemy, unless it's the Chiefs. If McDaniels wants to go to Kansas City and trade Denver for Patrick Mahomes, I'm perfectly fine with that. Just saying. But
Right,
everyone else,
right. He looks like he would, doesn't he? You've heard me tell you stories about high school coaches that I knew that they come in and they're like, the system works. You know, the most common, the most obvious one. We had this guy in a state championship at Division 2A, the second lowest level, the only lower level in Oregon was 8-man football. Okay, so he's coaching at the smallest possible school. He had two guys who were on the track team and set that level, still have that state level of the state records. They were brothers, and they didn't want to race against each other. So one did the 200, one did the 100, and then they did the relays together and set state records in those at that level. Those were his running backs in his double wing system. He just run toss lead, toss sweep, cross buck, whatever, and they'd outrun everybody. That was his offense. And then he finally gets a shot at a big school, and he's in papers being like, "The system works. The kids need to buy into it." We're over here going, "Yeah, we're coaching against him." And we're like, yeah, we know what you're going to run before you run it, and you can stop it with our JV kids. It's not your system. A little bit of a rant, but the point being, you get these coaches, and not those coaches, obviously, it's all walks of life. They're arrogant sometimes. Josh McDaniels is just doesn't. He keeps making decisions and so off the hubris. It's just amazing. It's just amazing.
I mean, the fact that he's been hired as a head coach 3 different times,
Yeah,
blows my mind, honestly, at times.
yeah. That's another component to it that, and I get it. I get why people do it. I didn't actually want to be the head coach. I wanted to be the guy. I just wanted to be a coordinator. I didn't want the hassle, right? But you see these guys constantly. He's a perfect example. It's like, okay, you were winning multiple goals. Is your pride such that you can't just be like, well, yeah, I work for Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick trusted you to do something within your ability. That's not enough. That's not enough for you. For me, it would have been winning all those Super Bowls would have been enough. I wouldn't have ever cared about being a head coach. But do what you will.
I mean, he certainly does. Here's an interesting stat. And I'm just noticing this stat. Josh McDaniels has been a coach for 17 years as an offensive coordinator or head coach. In those 17 years, he's had a top 10 offense nearly every single one. A top 10 scoring offense nearly every single one. There has been 5 times he's had a scoring offense outside of the top 10.
Okay.
Of those 5 times, 4 of them were as head coach or not with the Patriots. He does not have a top 10 scoring offense without the Patriots. The 4 seasons, Denver head coach, he had the 20th scoring offense. 2010, 19th. Goes to St. Louis to their OC, the 32nd ranked scoring offense. Next season, goes back to New England, number 1 scoring offense. And he's top 5, top 5, top 5, top 5, top 10. Then he had the 27th ranked in 2020, then rebounded back up to the 6th in 2021. And then goes to Las Vegas and has the 12th. I'm just saying there's a pattern here.
Yes, and I'll give, like this last season, Waller was hurt, right, most of the season, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't Devontae Adams miss a little bit of time this last year? Not a lot, but he missed a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
But still, honestly, I mean, they had that great running back. There's no there was even with that. I don't think there's an excuse. They should have been able to move the ball a little bit better. Um, I'm kind of beating that dead horse, aren't I? This turned into less about Jimmy G and more about the Raiders and their head coach.
I
But
mean, hey,
honestly, I think that is the story. I think ultimately Jimmy G, and I'm just echoing what a couple of other people have said. I think Jimmy G is going he will pass the physical. He'll have the surgery, pass the physical, and he'll be the opening day quarterback. Whether he makes it through the season or not, we're not dealing with that right now. But he'll be the opening day quarterback, and it'll be a moot point. Um, but the Raiders, I mean, boy, talk about fumbling it on this one. To me, that's the larger story than the injury itself.
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think seeing how McDaniels affects the team is really the bigger part of this. But that segues good to the next thing we wanted to talk about, because there's the debate of coaching and talent, and where does that intersect? But even a great coach needs talent to uplift. We see that with Bill Belichick. Belichick is a good coach. When he doesn't have Tom Brady, he doesn't look nearly as good. And
Right.
the same thing with Todd Bowles. Is without Tom Brady, he's gonna look pretty bad. Even with Tom Brady, he didn't look great last season. But speaking of the Bucs, the great QB battle in Tampa has started between the alliterative Baker Mayfield and
Yes.
the Floridian, I guess is the best thing, Floridian Kyle Trask. Truly, at the edge of our seats, we sit waiting to know which of these mediocre to terrible quarterbacks will be leading this mediocre to terrible team to a mediocre to terrible record. So why not talk about this mediocre to terrible situation? Baker Mayfield signing with the Bucs, of course, after being released from the Rams in last season, after he was traded for the Panthers. Kyle Trask has sat on the bench last season and has seen like 3 plays. And in those 3,
Yes.
I can tell you, let me pull up Kyle Trask. Kyle. Come here, Kyle. Kyle Trask. He has a career 9 attempts for 23 yards. He does have 1 first down.
Okay.
Which is more than it felt like the
Kudos.
Broncos had at multiple points in the season. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. This is why we don't talk when we haven't hit record. But Baker Mayfield has gotten overhated as a quarterback.
Yes.
We keep forgetting the fact that he won in Cleveland.
Yes.
He won in the place where quarterbacks go to die. It's devoid of life. They don't breathe oxygen. No matter how hyped a prospect is, they go to Cleveland and they perish. And
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield won a playoff game. He won a playoff game and played really well. And he beat a division rival. And then he nearly beat the Chiefs. And should have beaten the Chiefs. It came one missed call away from the Chiefs, beating the Chiefs. Now, I don't think Baker Mayfield is a great quarterback, or at this point, even a very good quarterback. But before we trash on him, I did want to at least say we have to give him his credit for overcoming Hugh Jackson and Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah. Well, I mean remember when they elevated Freddie Kitchens? It was like, who? What? I'm sorry. What? It was just bizarre. And this is one of those things you see organizations do this all the time. And they come off like, well, we know the guy. The guy's been working here. He's been doing, whatever. And then has that ever really worked out? No. So yeah, I'm with you. I told you before when we were talking about it that I've always kind of rooted against Baker Mayfield I kind of held a couple of the things with him from college against him, so to speak, and in the same breath, I acknowledge that if you were still judging me on the way I was in college, I'd have a problem because we grow and you mature, and I have been one of those people that have been unfair to Baker Mayfield. You're absolutely correct. He won in a place that, yeah, people don't win there. So and he's another one of those guys. It's so hard. I think you do need a top flight quarterback in the NFL, even though I kind of disrespect quarterbacks now because they've made it easier for them. That's another topic that you and I many late nights have discussed, how they've changed the rules to benefit the quarterbacks and stuff. Um, Even with that, you have to look at what Baker's done and give him credit. You have to give him credit. Doesn't mean he's the answer. Um, I don't think Tampa Bay's a contender with him at the helm, but we do know he's pretty accurate. He's tough. Yeah, get some credit for that.
But pretty accurate. He's 60% passer. So
they still have Tampa Bay now. Tampa Bay still has Chris Godwin, who I think is one of the underrated guys. Now he was injured much of last season. That was part of one of the issues for Brady. They still have Evans, who I think is those bigger-bodied receivers like that tend to fall off the cliff really quick, and Evans is not young, so I don't know, right? I don't know who else, but they've got like two excellent tight ends, Cameron Brate and I can't remember the other one.
Look at their roster right now. Let's see here. They have on the roster. They have three quarterbacks. John Wolford. They went for the Rams duo: Baker Mayfield, John Wolford, and Kyle Trask. And running backs, obviously they got Rashard White, Chase Edmonds, Ronnie Brown, not the college legend.
Not that Ronnie Brown.
At tight end, they have no one really.
No Fournette.
No Fournette, according to the team website, which I don't know if it's completely trustworthy.
Well, he came in kind of fat last year. They may have been like.
You got Mike Evans, you got Russell Gage, and Chris Godwin.
Oh yeah,
those are the kind of the big three, and that's it for the team.
Okay. I mean, no. Okay. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that Tampa Bay is going to be better than my first impulse was to say they would be. I'm not really committing to anything because I didn't tell anybody what I thought Tampa Bay was going to do, did I? But I think there's a possibility. Baker, he had a couple of good stretches, maybe not entire game, but he had some good. You're like, okay, that wasn't so bad with the Rams. You saw the flash here and there. I don't know how well they'll be able to run the ball. Whether or not Wirfs is back, is healthy, is going to be a big deal for them. Their tackle, he really good. That might actually be an interesting team to watch to see what happens with that.
I mean, I'm interested to see when we do. I'm assuming we'll probably do it as a prediction game by game for every team.
Yeah,
that will be fun. I don't think the Bucs will be 500. I think the Bucs will be a 5-win team, 4 or 5-win team.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but see, I was thinking of them as possibly a 3-win team originally.
Fair.
And I'm just saying I think they could hit that 5 if they shock somebody and got on a run. 6 wins, maybe even all the way up to 7 wins. But 7 would be a miraculous. That would be a fantastic season for them.
The thing that makes me feel like this team won't win is because who their coach is. We talked about this with the Raiders, Josh McDaniels. Who's the Bucs coach? It's Todd Bowles. He has a career .405 win percentage. He's only had one winning season in his entire career, and that was That was his first year as a coach in an extremely magical season. That 2015 Jets team with Fitzpatrick and Eric Decker and Brandon Marshall and Chris Ivory and Ballard Powell. I mean, it was a fun team. They should have made the playoffs. But since then, he's went 5-11, 5-11, 4-12, and 8-9 with Tom Brady, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin. So
he's another guy. Yeah, he's another guy that was better off as a coordinator.
Yeah,
and
great defensive coordinator.
Yes.
Interestingly, his defenses haven't been very good when he's head coach.
Right. Well, I think he's handed. I don't think he's had much with that. And again, that's another thing. I don't know. I would love to. I wish I could have. Because I've been close enough to some big college programs to kind of see what they do behind the scenes. Obviously, I know high school very well, but high school's nothing compared to even college. I have no idea what's going on. I'd love to just be a fly on the wall for a year, sit in on the meetings. And I don't think they'd ever let me, but sit in on the meetings, learn what they do.
I swear I'm not a spy.
I mean, look at some of these guys. What is it? Partly, I think one of their issues, the organization is a problem. You look at Hackett last year, for example, was clearly in over his head early in the games, and you don't understand it. It's like you're having trouble getting plays in on time. How is that? I had a little trouble getting plays in on time the very first JV game where I called the offense. By the time the guy's a college coach or a high school coach, brain cramp, I got concussions. By the time the guy's a pro coach, you would think he can get play in on time and leave it a bad play. Really strange, right? So I would love to be able to be in there and see what it is. My theory is that the head coach needs to function as a CEO of a company. He needs to. It's more about how you relate, because the relationship with pro players is not the same as it is with college players. You're in college, they owe their scholarship and everything. They're trying to get there, and they're almost your captive, even if it's only for a couple of seasons. In the pros, all those guys are making more money than their coaches are. How does a coach? A coach can't get on a guy. I think that's why the Ohio State guy failed. He tried to coach pro like he did college.
Urban Meyer.
Yeah. Why does Todd Bowles fail as a head coach? Why does Josh McDaniels fail as a head coach? It's not the X's and O's. The guys know the X's and O's.
Hackett, you could say the same thing.
Yes.
Aaron Rodgers called Nathaniel Hackett one of the smartest guys he's ever worked with.
Right. And Rodgers is like 97 years old and been playing football for forever. So yeah. What is it? I'm off on a little bit of a rant with that. We would talk about Wolves.
That is what the show is. I have a little bit of a random tangent to take you on.
Okay. Yes,
Todd Bowles. Talking about Todd Bowles. Do you know, this is brings it kind of full circle, but do you know the first game that Todd Bowles won as a head coach? And with what team? This is you're not gonna. I don't know if you just throw a random.
The Jets weren't.
It was
the Jets
not
weren't
the
his
Jets.
first.
It was not the Jets. I just take a
Was he at
stab.
Miami?
You're right. It was Miami. It was Miami in 2011. Tony Soprano was the head coach. Went 4-9, and Todd Bowles became the interim head coach, and he won his debut game against the Buffalo Bills. He would have then.
That's how he got his. That's how he got the Jets job, right?
Well, that was 4 years later. The Jets job was 4 years later.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Then he lost the Patriots and then beat the Jets. So he finished 2-1 that season as head coach. But what's interesting about this team is there's a couple notable names who were on this team. Namely,
11.
His first game, he beat the Buffalo Bills, right? Offensive coordinator of that team was Brian Dable, former Bills offensive coordinator and now Giants head coach. And tight ends coach was Dan Campbell.
Wow.
So there was 3 future NFL head coaches on that 6-10 horrible Miami Dolphins coaching staff. But there's your little bit of Todd Bowles trivia to pull out of the party. Nothing woos the women quite like saying, when Tom Bowles got his first victory in the NFL. Turn the lights down real low, put on some NFL films in the background. Whew.
Whenever I'm trying to score, I pull out Todd Bowles trivia. Yeah, as you gave me all, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to pull all of that out. The Miami was kind of a lucky, but Dan Campbell and all of that.
It is a funny situation that they all got their start in the same place, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I remember Todd Bowles as a player.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a player. He wasn't a star. He was just a solid player. And that's another interesting one. It's like not all players can transfer over to coaches.
Yeah, it's very, very true.
And I was thinking about this as we were saying this. So, and another one of the late night topics we've had. Football is so unfair, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, 28 years in high school. There's a few years in there. If you just looked at my record, the record of the people I was coaching with, you'd be like, yeah, not a very good coach. We had a 1-9 season, one school where I coached, and then 2 seasons later we're 9-1. Well, what changed? Well, the talent changed. And so you have Aaron Rodgers talking about how smart Hackett was. Obviously, we see Josh McDaniels with a whole bunch of Super Bowl rings from his time with the Patriots. And Bill Belichick doesn't suffer any fools, so obviously him keeping McDaniels on all that time. Has any of Belichick's assistants gone on and been particularly successful? I don't think so.
I mean, Belichick's assistants, Bill O'Brien was probably the most successful.
Ish, yeah.
I mean, because he had a winning season.
Here's the thing. And there's this old basketball coach that I knew at one of the first schools that I coached. Used to say you can't make chicken soup out of chicken crap. And the other thing he would say is you can't coach 6'10". And what he meant was, we played a couple of teams. It was a small Catholic school, and we played a couple of teams, and his teams were fantastic. So organized, so sharp. They didn't make mistakes. With basketball, you miss one shot, and this team that has 2 6'10" guys, those guys just grab it. Whoops.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys just grab it and put it back in. And it's like we did everything right, but our tallest guy is 6'4". And so there's been a lot of talk. What are you doing?
Oh,
Having
good old
technical.
technology. Technical difficulties on the stream side of things.
Um, what those guys all had Tom Brady. You know, Hackett had Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady by uh, the same token had them. It was a match made in heaven for them. He
Or in
had
hell,
players
depending
that
on
came
who you're a fan of.
depending on your point of view. Tom Brady also had Julian Edelman, who would have played with a missing limb. One of the toughest people ever, and he had great defensive players, and he had, so all of that stuff comes together. And sometimes we're sitting there. Now, I still think Josh McDaniels is terrible, but it's because his personnel decisions just stand out as utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
But yeah, but
horrible.
that's the thing. We're sitting here and we're right when we say, when you say Todd Bowles has not been a successful coach. Well, win-loss, a very successful coach. It's kind of weird to say not been a successful coach. He's a coach. Not bad. But we're correct when we say something like that. But it's also so unfair, right? Because all of these
Yeah.
guys, if we sat down, I'll bet every coach we could think of, if we sat down at a coffee table and said, show me your offense, show me how would you do this? It would be fascinating, right? It would be absolutely fascinating, and they'd be talking about concepts that we'd just be like, whoa, but they can't get it done on the field. Is it because they didn't have the right guys? Is it because what is it? I don't know. That really was a rant that I didn't need to go on.
I mean,
It's always on my mind when I'm watching people play. It's like, what if that guy was in a different situation?
that's what I think. I think a lot with. The guy I always think as a Bronco fan, I always think about that with Jay Cutler. Um,
Yep.
if he had not been in the Bears, obviously he had a lot of arm talent. Yeah, same thing with kind of like a guy like Brandon Marshall, who had a solid career, but what could have it been? Shameless self promotion of other things that if you're watching this, you almost certainly are going to watch. I'm working on another what made that player great with about Herman Moore for the Lions, and he's another guy that's a huge what if. What if he had someone other than Scott Mitchell throwing him the football? And I think what ifs in sports, it's part of the beauty of it, but it's also part of the pain of it.
Yes.
And I saw someone say, what is sports if not getting your hopes up only to have them dashed?
Yes, when you stop and think about it, so I can look back on my life as a fan. Let's say, because, obviously I'm still a 49er fan-ish, not a rabid fan like I was in the Joe Montana era.
Boo.
But, but, a fan. Now I'm much more of a, there's actually a couple teams I root against, and otherwise I'm just watching football and enjoying it, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you went back to the beginning of it all, and you said you better enjoy these '80s and that one year in the '90s, because that's it, son. You're not getting any more. I might have been like, "Whoa, get me off this train," because that would mean that I would only have 5 years in a lifetime of fandom where my team was the best team, right? That's not a great ratio, you know. If you told me, if I was a hardcore Blazer fan, Trailblazer fan, and you'd be like, yeah, that year when you're 10 years old, that's it. That's it, kid. Not going to get any better than that, But they got close. The Niners have gotten close. The Broncos have gotten close. How many do you have? Three.
3. 1 in my lifetime.
Right. You might not get another one.
Yeah.
Right. That's to stop and think about that. And the odds are that you're gonna have another great team at some point and feel like you've got a shot. But it's so fleeting. It's so hard. Sports and I saw somebody recently on it was comments on an article on Facebook or something, and and everybody in there was just trashing on paying all these people millions. What if we just did away with sports? And I was like, you know, I my wife used to worry that if we had kids and they were artists or musicians, that I would poo-poo it, that I wouldn't be supportive because I was such a sports guy, and I was like, okay, first of all, not fair because I love music and art and whatever, but I can play the guitar, not particularly well, but I can do it. I like music. I love music. I would have wanted them to do whatever they wanted to do well. I think sports is unique in there's so much beauty and pain and longing and heart and love and hate. I mean, the full range of human experience you get from sports. Um, and it can harden you. It can harden your heart. It can temper you. It can make you stronger. You can be forged in the. I'm going to use the fires of hell, being a sports fan or participating. But yeah, I don't know. Again, another rant. This is just a meandering night. Yeah,
I
yeah. I don't
mean,
know.
that's part of the name.
That's why we like talking about it.
That's why,
That's part of why we like talking about it.
and that's the beauty of sports is that every moment might be the last moment that you have of that.
Yes.
If you're a Packer fan, you might not get a Hall of Fame quarterback for years.
Yeah.
To have back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks is insane to have.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about sports though is like I know I've seen Packer fans who are in a way relieved to not have Rodgers this season,
Rogers there.
to not have. And what they brought up is that they haven't won a Super Bowl since 2011. What was it, something like that? And the
Oh yeah.
pressure of every year, this has to be it. This is it. This is it. This is it. It's like nice to just be like, we're just gonna sit back and see what Jordan Love has, and it's not a failure. And it's interesting because at any point in like the moment that you can actually really enjoy is so small with sports.
Right.
As a Bronco fan, 2012 was a great season. Loved the season. And I
Right.
can't remember it fondly because of how it ended in double overtime against the Ravens.
Right.
I forget the guy's name who
Uh.
left his feet
Yeah.
on the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, damn you. You crushed my soul. But and then the next year, 2013, historic offense, amazing team, but the Super Bowl sours that season. And when you're a thirsty fan, when you're a fan who hasn't had a success for your team, you're like, I don't care. I'd just be happy about a winning record. I just want to make the playoffs. But once you get that taste, you want more of it. You want to get there until you get to that championship. Then you have a couple months of actually really have a year. Once your team wins the championship, there's about a year where you don't really care what happens. Like the couple years after the Broncos won the Super Bowl, it's like,
bask in it.
who cares? Yeah, we were whatever.
Yeah.
We haven't had a winning season in like 3 seasons, whatever. I mean the last, and then you start being like, okay, guys, anytime you wanna win some games.
I think when you start for me, like, because the Niners, right? A lot of winning in there, and then the last year that when Lawrence Phillips didn't pick up the blitz and Steve Young got another concussion and was done, and the Niners remember you had this feeling. You're sitting there looking at it, and you're like, "Wait a minute, we're not contenders. We're not actually contenders, and I'm not sure when we will be again." That's when the glow of winning. That's when you're not basking in it anymore. When
Nope.
you're like, when you realize that you may not feel it again. And it's tough. And I was thinking as you were talking about, those seasons being soured. Imagine being a Buffalo Bills fan from the
Every
90s.
just a Buffalo Bills fan, period.
Well, yes,
But 90s
but
especially, of
it
course.
it was we all were like, well, I mean, virtually every year there, it was like, who's the best team in the NFL? And a lot of us were like, well, it's actually Buffalo. They just they just didn't win last. Well, it's Buffalo. They just and unlucky for a couple of years. And then the third, I mean, I think it might be Buffalo, but I mean, I remember on Tecmo Bowl or whatever game it was, you wanted Buffalo. You didn't want the Cowboys. You didn't want the Redskins. You didn't want, all the teams that beat them. You sure didn't want the Giants. That Giant team was boring, right?
Every Giants team that's won is boring.
True.
What is it about the
Okay.
Giants? What is it about the
Okay.
Giants? I mean, side note, the fact that the Giants went out and they had Eli Manning, like just the most vanilla quarterback,
Yeah.
until the playoffs, but vanilla quarter. I mean, he finished perfect 500 and 500 record,
Oh,
or
right.
something like that, or 500 touchdowns, 500 picks, whatever. He had something. It was some. I think it was a record. And they go
Yeah.
out and they go from
He doesn't,
him.
he doesn't have 500 touchdowns.
There's no way. Yeah, I don't. As soon as I said that, I was like, that's not happening.
Eh.
Um, and then as soon as they get rid of him, they go out and get his doppelganger. With, I mean, I would say Daniel Jones is a little bit more exciting. They didn't get a Mac Jones situation, but
Right. Right.
you were saying though.
Well, no. It's just more of the same. It's just more of the, wow, sports. It's just more of that whole thing about it to me. Um, that people that don't understand sports are never going to understand
Yeah.
the emotions behind it, the pain of loss and the pain. It's like, and you should. I mean, I remember even my father, who would, I'd be like yelling at the screen watching a game, and Dad's like, they can't hear you. Stop it. And he'd be staying calm, and whatnot. He was pretty calm in the games, but I can remember seeing my father's face after a loss that they hadn't really done anything wrong. It just didn't work, and it's like, on a team that was pretty good, and that realization that was their shot and they just missed it. It's over. You know. So yeah, I don't know. It's all. I'm really feeling the nostalgia and thinking about that because we're sitting here talking about these guys, and again, we're correct, not particularly successful, and they go through a lot. you know, my
Hmm.
gosh, they go through a lot.
Yeah, it's the
Uh,
brutality of sports. Um,
yeah,
and it's every aspect. It's the contracts. It's off field. It's on the field, and
yeah.
that
Injuries.
injuries. Yeah, and that brings us to another segue to another player who's on the chopping block. Is Dalvin Cook. Been a guy for the team for years, but he's a running back, and he's not 20. He's
Yeah, how old is he? Is he?
he's
He's
about
not 30 yet.
he's going to be 28 this season. He's owed.
That's
His cap hit is 14.1 this season, and it looks like he's going to be traded. According to Over the Cap, this is a fantastic website. If he's
yes.
cut, post June 1st, so we're recording this Pacific time, 36 minutes before June 1st. When you're listening to this, it's already June 1st. If they cut him at this point, they will save $4 million. But if they trade him, they're going to save nearly $8 million. So almost double the savings if they trade him away. I've seen a couple reports pointing him toward Miami. I've seen people speculate Buffalo.
Miami.
The Miami one's slightly joking. Mike McDaniels mentioned him. He dropped his name in we were talking about extra cap space, and he mentioned mentioned Dalvin Cook. So everyone's thinking him now. If he goes to Buffalo, what would be interesting is that he would be playing with his brother.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But where do you think that Dalvin Cook's going to end up? And do you think that he's going to be able to get a good production?
Well, yeah, I think if he's traded, how much time has he got left on his contract? Do you know?
Yeah, let me look at that. Hold on, let me look at that.
Uh,
He signed through his age 30 season, so 2025.
okay.
And he's making 4.5 to 14 this season, 15.6 next, 14.5 in 2025.
Okay.
But no guarantee. You could cut him before his 30-year-old season. No penalty, it looks like.
So okay, so I think like if you traded for Dalvin Cook now, if you're Buffalo, which I think interesting. Well, let's say Buffalo because I was thinking earlier when we were talking about Hopkins and Buffalo, I almost said Buffalo ought to sign Ezekiel Elliott. They need that more than they need Hopkins. They need a guy that can score on the ground in the red zone. Why not Dalvin Cook? Now, Cook is a little bit different running back than Ezekiel Elliott. Elliott is not the player that he was. He's not the best running back in the league like he was for a while, but he can still score. He can still get the ball in, from the 5 quite well. And that was one of the things that they struggled with, right?
I mean, running game in general for Buffalo. I mean,
yes,
they couldn't.
Part of that was philosophy, but yes.
Oh, and that's the thing you don't have to be a good running team to win in the NFL. You have to be able to run in the NFL to win.
Yes.
I feel like, and the Chiefs are exactly the example of that. I mean.
Yeah, they can run enough.
Didn't run that much, obviously, but then Pacheco took over in the Super Bowl.
Yep. 7th round pick, by the way.
That dude is how did he fall to the 7th? That guy runs with so much anger. Is. I love watching him run the football. He's fantastic. Even as a Bronco fan, I hate that the Chiefs are so good.
You had to appreciate it. Yeah, you had to appreciate it. Yeah. So to answer your question, which because I didn't, did I? I think they could get if he went to Buffalo, for example. How many yards did he have last season?
Last season, Dalvin Cook, his first full season that he's played in his career, he had 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4.4 on per carry, and 300 yards more through the air.
Yeah, he's back. I didn't realize that he hadn't done a full season.
He's
interesting.
And then
he's been injured prone.
He's had some injuries.
Yeah. But he doesn't have to be the only guy. His brother's not terrible.
James Cook is a solid running back.
Yeah, and so having another guy in there. So if Dalvin Cook went to Buffalo and got them 4.5 yards per carry, carried the ball enough to get 600, 700 yards, possibly, and if something happens and he's up there 800-900 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns, and then is still healthy going into the playoffs, you could do that for a couple of years, I think.
I totally agree with that. I'd love to see a Dalvin Cook to Buffalo trade. I think you want Dalvin Cook if you're Buffalo way more than you want Ezekiel Elliott, and the reason being, Dalvin Cook, both him Elliott's the same age, but he was drafted a year earlier, and the big difference is Dalvin Cook has just under 1,300 carries on him. Elliott has just under 1,900 carries on him. So that's a big difference when it comes to running backs. He has a full year in the NFL on him, and I don't think Elliott could be a good situational back, I think, for someone, but I think bringing in a guy like Dalvin Cook, who seemed to be in the sweet spot of, if you give him around 250 carries over a season, perfect for him. Not going to get him injured. And James Cook averaged almost 6 yards per carry on 89 carries last season. I think that putting the Cook brothers together would be a really cool story, but I also think it might work. With Dalvin Cook having Alexander Mattison, if I can pull up his stat, Madison has been really good for his career, because Madison has been a good running back, under 4 yards per carry the last 2 years, but he's taking the workload off, getting 74 carries this last season, 134 the year before. If you can get 100 carries, 100 to 150 carries out of your backups, probably out of James Cook, I think Dalvin Cook is a perfect fit for Buffalo, to me.
Yeah.
And he's great out of the backfield, so he still gives that dynamic ability for the team, and you don't have to lean on him. I think it's but the question really comes down to, what's the price going to be if you are the Buffalo Bills? What are you willing to give up? And what do the Vikings want for him? Cap-wise, the Bills don't have much cap, so probably have to send a player back with him.
Okay.
Oh my God, I forgot you still have that. You still have that Von Miller contract. Oh my goodness.
They do?
Yeah. That was a bust of a contract. I love Von Miller, but man, him getting injured just. His cap number this season is 5.1. Last season was 5.1. This season is 7.9 million. Next season it jumps up to $23.8 million. That's quarterback money for a 35-year-old.
I mean, they were. That's one of those big swings to try to get a championship thing, obviously.
And they can't really get out from under that. There's not much relief I can see for them. But I think that's
Dalvin may not even be possible for him. Who knows?
I mean, I think if anything, the Saints have taught us over the last couple seasons that the cap is made up and doesn't actually matter. So
Touche.
So I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it should be an interesting year. And wow, that was. I felt like the show went by quickly. We're already an hour in.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you want to talk about? I forget.
I went off rambling for a little while on a couple of different topics, so I stretched it out longer than I needed to.
That's pretty much what the show is. It is Insomniac Sports, the Ramble Show.
Yes. One little thing to leave them with, going back to possible, and again, credit to Rich Eisen. It wasn't not me, but the more I wrestled with it, I thought I could see that. So here's a scenario for you. Jimmy G fails his physical, and out of nowhere, and despite all odds,
Don't say it.
Um, uh, Sam Darnold is the Week 1 starter for the Niners because Purdy's not quite there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Think the Raiders would be interested in Trey Lance? Are Jimmy G and Trey Lance just destined to be intertwined? Again, not my idea originally. I want to give credit where credit is due.
I think that comes with I think there's two elements to that. The question is what internally, what are the Raiders looking at this season as?
Right.
If is McDaniels on the hot seat in his job at all? If he's on the hot seat, I can see him making a trade like that. Now, is if the feeling is we're trying to build for the future, we're bringing Jimmy G, see if this works out, and whatever.
Yeah.
And they lose Jimmy G. There's something about the fact that you don't bring any backups when you have a quarterback any good backups when you have a quarterback who can't stay healthy. That feels intentional. That feels like a Hail Mary. If he stays healthy, we'll have a good season. But if not, we'll be able to shamelessly tank.
You're going right where I wondered. I mean, are they in on the Caleb Williams sweepstakes as well?
Why do you get rid of Derek Carr? Why do you get rid of Derek Carr and then do a lateral move to bring in Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yeah.
And then bring in
at best might play 8 games.
And you get rid of Jarrett Stidham, who played pretty good in his final few games. I've seen some reports that have said that Sean Payton really likes Stidham and that they brought him in as a possible long-term option. The Broncos did in case Russell Wilson does not pan out.
He complimented him before he even had the Broncos job on Colin Cowherd's show.
Yeah, and I mean, Stidham, that was a decently sized contract for a guy who's played 3 games in 3 seasons in the NFL.
Yeah.
Why did the Raiders get rid of Derek Carr, who at the very least is a good quarterback? He's a locker room dude. They get rid of him, and they get rid of a young guy who just showed some promise. Like, why do you play him at the end of the season? Like, everyone thought they were benching Derek Carr because they wanted to see what Stidham had, but then Stidham played good, and they still cut him.
Traded Darren Waller, right? Or did they just let him go?
Yeah, they traded him for like a 4th-round pick. I think you're right. I think they're in on the Caleb Williams sweepstake, and the way we'll know is that Jimmy G will go down with some weird injury, his Liz Frank injury, hold him, whatever. It will be something weird.
Yeah.
And he'll just get held out, and the team starting Aiden O'Connor will flub their way to
wheel Hoyer out on a wheelchair.
Oh my god! Oh, Brian Hoyer. That's his name.
I mean, I other than the, I actually feel more. I feel more okay with, and I'm not okay with it really, but I'm more okay with it from the Cardinals than from the Raiders, because the Raiders, if that's the case, and it might merely be adapting to the circumstances, okay, but it isn't, because it still isn't, because they were banking on a guy who's been fragile his entire career. But I understand why an organization would sit here and look at a potentially. Everything I hear about Caleb Williams is that he's a generational quarterback. I watched him a few times in college. It's hard to tell in some ways in college, because college is even easier for quarterbacks than the NFL with some of the blocking rules and stuff. Everybody's running the zone read, and it makes it nearly impossible for a defense to get a read on a quarterback. So you see some guys do really well. So Caleb Williams looked great. I trust the guys that say he's a potentially generational quarterback. You're sitting there looking at a guy that's maybe an Andrew Luck type of quarterback. I completely understand why a team would be looking at that and wanting to do that. I completely get it. It feels a little slimy though. You know,
It does.
It's one of those. It's one of those long-term things that you're like, deal with a little bit of pain now for potential greatness for 10 years. I mean, yeah, when you look at it that way, you get it. I was wondering if you were going to come around to part of the asking about Trey Lance and moving that way. I was sort of like wondering if you were going to get to the Caleb Williams carousel because I look at that. I'm a cynic, and I think everyone's trying to kind of weasel their way into something anyway. I just look at what they did in the offseason, and I cannot give credit to Rich Eisen for this because he did not. None of them said anything about them trying to get Caleb Williams, but.
And you know what they say is like whenever I see things, they say that players and coaches don't try to tank. They're always trying their best,
Yeah.
and I do believe that for the most part. But that's why I think this was set up this way. I think this is a situation where they've set up a plausible way for them to say that they're trying. But if things go poorly, like they probably will, I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
What can you do? We had what were we supposed to do? We had Brian Hoyer as our backup quarterback. I mean, come on. What do you think we're going to win with?
Yeah.
I think that's one of those, like, they couldn't justify to the fans tanking outright.
Yeah.
Like, the Cardinals can justify it because they got nothing. I mean, their quarterback seems more likely like he's going to, win a Call of Duty championship than a NFL championship anytime soon. They lose their number one receiver. J.J. Watt retires. They lose, their defensive coordinator. It's just not a great situation for the Cardinals.
Yeah.
And they're in flux. It makes sense for them to tank. They're just not a good team. They need a reset. They're not even tanking. They're just not a good team. And
right.
But the Raiders, if the Raiders had come out and just imagine if the Raiders had traded Waller, cut Carr, and then didn't bring in anyone. They couldn't have justified to the Vegas fans that we're trying. And a lot of it's public opinion. Bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo allows you to save face and say, hey, we brought in Jimmy Garoppolo, who's a Pro Bowler. We're excited.
He knows the system.
Yeah. The system. Yeah. So I think it's a casual way to, accidentally didn't mean to tank if I'm going to be honest.
And one problem they're going to have if they do it, because I think, excuse me, you mentioned the fans. I imagine the fans in Vegas are a different breed. They're if that show's not interesting, they're going to go somewhere else. There's another show just down the road. I don't know. It's kind of, I don't see Vegas football fans as being hardcore like Pittsburgh fans, right? So yeah, like you said, you kind of put it that way, but you've also got, I mean, they invested quite a lot into Devontae Adams, and this is the other piece. How do you explain to Devontae Adams that you're like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go to him in the background and say, look, we're trying to get you a better quarterback. We're trying to get you a really good quarterback. Just bear with us. You can't do that. They're not gonna get away with that because players don't want to. I don't care who you are. Players want to win. And like you said, it's very hard to tank in a situation like that because the players want to win and they know there's no loyalty there. You know, if you're taking one for the team and like trying to tank, you get cut next year.
Yep.
You know, you're like, thanks, hey, thanks, but we're not bringing you back. You know, so yeah. But how do you explain to Devontae Adams that what's he got left? You pulling up? What's he got left?
He signed
Like 5 years
he
left,
signed
right?
through the 2026 season. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. So minus
Right. So that's minus a trade that
yeah.
comes up because he forces his way out. So that's a tough one, right? But again, I understand the impulse. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
It's one thing that I'm sure we'll talk about more as the season gets on, as we get
Yeah.
closer to the season 2. And, I mean, who knows if Jimmy G's even going to play this season. We'll see here. And that's another thing, is if he doesn't play and they just part their ways, I'm going to call collusion with Jimmy G and Josh McDaniels and accidentally whoops on, definitely not on purpose, tanking. I'm sure that will be a conversation we come back to quite a bit.
Oh. Uh, there's another component to all this, though. Before we, Tom Brady's a part owner of the Raiders.
Yeah.
Is he going to be all right with tanking?
Oh,
A lot of questions.
Thomas Brady. Yeah. He's come to haunt me as a Bronco fan. From the grave.
My goodness.
My God.
How many Titans are we going to have get injured in this game?
About as many as we see in real life, aka the entire team.
It's like 4. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah. Brady. That's a whole bag of words. I don't even know where to start with Brady. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean,
If I'm Tom Brady, I'm in the room going, wait, what are we doing? I'm never
yeah.
okay with tanking.
Oh yeah, 100%. As my perfect timing, because my son just woke up. So
All right.
we'll wrap this episode up, and we will talk to you all next time. If you have questions for us, leave them below. And as always, this has been Insomniac Sports. Stay sleepless, and we'll see you next time.
I'll try to do better next time, folks.